The morning at Blackwood Enterprises began like any other, fast, sharp, and cold. Employees scurried through the glass doors with coffee cups in hand, murmuring greetings as the click of polished shoes echoed across the marble lobby. At the heart of it all, Ethan Blackwood strode through the hallways with his usual air of quiet authority. Dressed in a tailored charcoal suit, his expression was unreadable, every inch the CEO the world expected him to be. His presence commanded silence, even the sound of conversation seemed to shrink when he walked by. But inside, Ethan wasn't thinking about the numbers flashing on his tablet or the upcoming board meeting. His mind was a fog of exhaustion and emptiness, a constant hum of loss he had learned to carry for 5 long years. The death of his wife, Clara, had hollowed him out. He buried himself in work, convincing himself that success was a fair trade for peace. But no matter how many awards or headlines he earned, the loneliness in his penthouse never changed. As he approached the elevator, a small metallic clink broke the rhythm of his stride. Something had fallen to the floor near his polished shoes. He frowned, glancing down to see a faint glimmer beneath the bright lobby lights. Before he could reach for it, a voice called out from behind him, soft, uncertain, and entirely out of place in his world. "Sir, you dropped this." He turned. Standing a few feet away was a young woman in a faded blue janitor's uniform. Her name tag read Lena. Her dark hair was tied back messily, a smudge of cleaning solution staining one sleeve. She looked far too young to be working here, 18, maybe 19, but her wide eyes were earnest as she stepped forward, holding out the small silver object in her hand. Ethan took a step closer, irritation flickering in his eyes. "That's not mine," he said flatly, his tone curt. But then his gaze shifted, just for a second, down to the pendant resting in her open palm. It was delicate, oval-shaped, with a faint engraving on the back, "To my Clara, forever." Ethan froze. His breath hitched in his chest, and the noise of the busy lobby dissolved into a suffocating silence. The world seemed to narrow to that single, fragile locket gleaming in the janitor's daughter's hand. It couldn't be. It was impossible. He had seen that very piece of jewelry lowered into the ground with his wife. Ethan's heartbeat thundered in his ears as he stared at the locket, every instinct telling him this couldn't be real. The air around him thickened, and for the first time in years, the confident CEO looked completely lost. His voice, when it came, was quieter than usual, hoarse, almost disbelieving. "Where did you get this?" The young woman, Lena, blinked in confusion, glancing down at the pendant she was still holding. I didn't steal it, sir," she said quickly, her voice trembling. "It was just lying on the floor near the elevators. I thought it belonged to you." Ethan shook his head, his usually calm composure cracking. "No," he murmured, stepping closer. His gaze was locked on the locket like it might disappear if he looked away. "I've seen this before." Something in his tone made her hesitate. He wasn't angry anymore. He sounded almost haunted. She took an uncertain step back, clutching the locket protectively. "It's mine now," she said, her voice soft but firm. "My mother gave it to me when I was little." Those words hit him like a blow. His eyes flicked up to her face, really looking at her now. She was young, barely out of her teens, but her eyes, those deep brown eyes, felt achingly familiar. For a heartbeat, he saw Clara in them. The same warmth, the same quiet sadness. His throat tightened painfully. "What did you say?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Your mother gave it to you." Lena nodded, clearly bewildered by his sudden change in tone. "Yes, she said it was important. That it used to belong to someone she loved very much." Ethan swallowed hard, the edges of memory tearing open inside him. He could almost hear Clara's laughter again, see her tucking that very same locket beneath her blouse every morning. She never went anywhere without it. He remembered holding it the night before she died, promising her he'd be home early, only to return to flashing lights and the sound of sirens. He had identified her body himself. But if that was true, if she had died and been buried with the locket, how could this girl have it now? Ethan's mind spun, every logical explanation collapsing under the weight of something deeper, stranger. He took another step closer. "What was your mother's name?" he asked, his voice trembling for the first time in years. Lena hesitated. "Clara," she said finally. "Clara Evans." The world seemed to stop. Ethan's blood ran cold. The name was a ghost from his past, a name he hadn't heard spoken aloud since the funeral. Clara Evans. His Clara. For a long moment, Ethan couldn't move. The name Clara Evans echoed in his mind like a bell tolling through fog, dredging up pieces of a past he had tried desperately to bury. His chest felt tight, his hands cold. It was as if someone had ripped open time itself and forced him to look straight into a life he'd lost. He took a slow step forward, his eyes never leaving Lena's face. The resemblance that had seemed faint before now burned with painful clarity. The curve of her jaw, the soft arch of her eyebrows, even the way she tilted her head when she spoke, it was all Clara. The only difference was the innocence in her expression, untouched by the world that had hardened him. Ethan's voice cracked when he finally spoke. "Your mother, Clara Evans. How old were you when she passed away?" Lena hesitated, startled by the intensity in his tone. "I was 6, she said softly. "It happened suddenly. My father never told me much. He just said she'd been in an accident, and after that, we moved away." Ethan's heart clenched. That was the same year Clara had died, at least, when he had buried her. Every detail matched, every memory lining up like puzzle pieces that shouldn't fit but somehow did. His vision blurred for a moment as flashes from the past stormed through him. Clara's laughter, her hands warm in his, her whispering about wanting children, the locket she wore, the one that now glimmered in this girl's hand. His voice dropped, rough and trembling. "Did she ever talk about someone she loved before your father?" Lena frowned slightly. "Not really," she said. She didn't like to talk about the past. But sometimes, she trailed off, glancing down at the locket. "Sometimes I'd catch her staring at it, crying. When I asked, she'd just say, 'It's a piece of a life I lost too soon.' I never understood what she meant." Ethan pressed a hand to his mouth, his composure unraveling. The pain that had been buried under layers of control surged back with full force. Could it be that Clara hadn't died that night? That she'd survived, injured, maybe confused, and started over with someone else? But if that were true, why hadn't she come back? Why hadn't she told him? The questions burned through him, each one heavier than the last. He looked at Lena again. This young woman who shouldn't exist, and yet, somehow, did. His voice broke as he whispered, "You look just like her." Lena blinked in surprise. "Like my mother." He nodded, tears gathering in his eyes for the first time in years. "Exactly like her." A long silence stretched between them, fragile, filled with ghosts. The CEO and the janitor's daughter stood in the middle of the gleaming lobby, bound by a locket that shouldn't have existed in a past neither of them fully understood. Ethan stood frozen, the bustling world around him fading into an indistinct blur. The lobby lights seemed too bright, the murmurs of his employees too distant, as if he were standing underwater. Lena, this girl who shouldn't have meant anything to him, was now the only thing anchoring him to reality. She shifted nervously under his gaze, clutching the locket tighter, unaware that her very presence was tearing open a wound he thought had scarred over long ago. He took a deep, unsteady breath and reached out a trembling hand. "May I?" he asked quietly, his voice stripped of its usual authority. Lena hesitated, then nodded and placed the locket gently into his palm. The metal was warm from her touch. He turned it over slowly, his thumb tracing the tiny inscription engraved on the back, "To my Clara, forever." His chest tightened painfully. There was no doubt now. This wasn't just a replica. This was hers. His voice dropped to a whisper. "I gave her this on our wedding day." Lena's brow furrowed. "You knew my mother?" Ethan lifted his gaze to meet hers. "She wasn't just someone I knew," he said softly. "She was my wife." The words hung between them, fragile and heavy. Lena's eyes widened, disbelief flashing across her face. "That's not possible," she said, shaking her head. "My father's name was Daniel Evans. They were married. At least, that's what my birth certificate says." Ethan's throat felt dry. "Your mother disappeared after the accident," he murmured. "Her car went off the bridge near Willow Creek. They found the wreck, but her body was burned beyond recognition. I buried what they told me was her remains, along with this locket." His hand trembled as he looked down at it again. "But now, I don't know what to believe." Lena took a step closer, her voice softer now. "You think she survived?" He met her eyes, and for the first time in years, Ethan didn't try to hide the pain etched into his features. "I don't know," he whispered. "But if she did, she must have had a reason for never coming back." A tear slipped down his cheek before he could stop it. Lena, moved by something she didn't fully understand, reached out and gently touched his sleeve. "Maybe she wanted to protect you," she said quietly. "Or protect me." Ethan's gaze softened, the coldness that once defined him melting away. "You have her heart," he murmured. "The same kindness, the same eyes." Lena gave a small, uncertain smile. "Maybe that's what she wanted, for you to find me." The lobby fell silent, the hum of business life momentarily forgotten. In that moment, time itself seemed to pause, a man rediscovering a part of his soul, and a daughter unknowingly returning what he had lost. Ethan closed his hand around the locket, holding it close to his chest. "I lost her once," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "I won't lose you too." And for the first time in years, Ethan Blackwood, cold, untouchable CEO, felt something he hadn't in a long time. Hope.